Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
All right. Hello. Welcome to the MuseCast. I am Shawna and that is Dan Kent, and we are so glad to be here with you today. We're going to start off on a bit of a lighter note, Dan, because I was watching the other night, because on some of my favorite channels, they're already starting to play Christmas movies, and I just can't with that right now. I'm very opposed to that. So I was just, channel surfing just to kind of, just go mind numb for a little bit. And I came upon, I don't know if you've ever seen that show, My Lottery Dream Home. And so it's when people who've won the lottery and the host takes them wherever they live. He takes them around to show them some options for their dream home. And sometimes their dream home, they're going to spend $200,000 on it. Sometimes they're going to spend $100,000. Sometimes they're going to spend a couple of million. It's it's all over the place. So it's kind of funny and cool. But it got me to thinking, because one of the episodes I watched was a Minnesota couple who won $11.7 million.
Wow.
I can't even fathom that. But of course, I start to think, what would I do if I won $11.7 million? And so I have some ideas, but I want to know, Dan, would you still... What would you do? And first of all, would you still work at Woodland Hills? Would you still do that?
I feel like this is a part of my job review here right now. So how seriously committed? How seriously committed is this guy to all of this? Well, first of all, I would say yes, I would still work here, which would create some problems, because I think with my $11 million, I would go and buy a solar-powered catamaran, which is one of those pontoon-looking yachts. Mm-hmm. And it's basically you could live on the ocean. And since it's solar-powered, you wouldn't need to go refuel all the time. You just kind of go about. But in order to keep my job here, which I love so much, I would also need a helicopter. So, I would have to kind of do both. So it'd be complicated. It would be complicated. So, but it would be well worth it, because I do love the Woodland Hills community. So how about you? What would your dream home be?
So yes, I would still work at Woodland. Maybe I would do it for free or whatever, because I can't do that right now. But maybe I would. I don't know. Because I like what we do. It's really great and fun. Mm-hmm. Honestly, when you get past all of the, 4 kids, college, all of that stuff, of course, donating and those things. I am a simple gal, and I just want a cute little cabin up the Gunflint Trail overlooking one of the little side lakes, a 4-season cabin so I can go up there any old time, and with really good Wi-Fi so I can maybe work from up there.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi is key. That's key. Key. So even if you have enough money to get away, you still need to be connected, which is important still. Yeah,
for sure. All right, well, back to reality, because I don't think either of us have 11.7 sitting in the old account. So we soldier on.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Part of our jobs is to engage with this audience about what we are hearing on the weekends. And so this past weekend, we wrapped up the Lost Art of Friendship series. And there was an interview with the author Bronwyn Lee. And so we just thought today, since that service wrapped up the series, this MuseCast will wrap up the MuseCast version of this series. And so we're just going to offer some thoughts about things that stood out to us from the series, circle back to a couple of questions here and there that we have gotten throughout to the series that maybe we haven't talked about. We've talked about a lot. And so we just are going to kind of button it all up and put a bow on it and send us off. And so I think first of all, Dan, since we did just do the interview with Bronwyn, and her book was about really seeing one another as family and all of that, is there anything that when you think of relating as brothers and sisters or as in-laws or however it works for you, is there anything that stood out to you or anything that you'd like to, a trail you'd like to go down? another perspective you'd like to add, this is your turn, your time.
Well, that's great. I get a chance at the spotlight right here. This is great. I did want to talk a little bit about that. And we have talked about it during the series, but enough people have kind of mentioned it and brought it up that I think it's worth discussing again. And that is, it has to do with the fact that as soon as you start talking about the church as family and the kingdom of God as brothers and sisters, that can be a trigger for some people who come from some pretty dysfunctional families. And, when they think of family, they don't think of anything good and healthy and vibrant. They think of danger and they think of abuse and things like that. And I guess what I would want to say is that two things. Number one, the Bible knows that. The Bible is crystal clear that a lot of people's families are very dysfunctional and very kind of just destroyed with sin. And what really sort of warms my heart on this is how many of God's people and how many of the heroes of the faith sort of come up through these types of families. I mean, we have in the revelation of God in the Old Testament, we have families with incest, families with alcoholism, families who abandon their kids, brothers who ditch Joseph in a well, and just leave him for dead. I mean, I've seen some sibling rivalry before, but I've never seen that. It gets really extreme. Just the dysfunction in the Old Testament, and yet. And I think the story of Joseph is so great too, because we're still called a family. And so I think what that means, the fact that we're the kingdom of the loving, perfectly loving God is called brothers and sisters and called a family. And yet the Bible is also not ignorant of all of this dysfunction and all of the dangers and all of the pain that family has caused. I think that tells us something. It tells us that when God is talking about a family, he's talking about this ideal, this kind of agape love family, this kingdom of God family. And the fact that people experience suffering and pain is really sort of a profound perversion of what God calls us to. And God is calling us to this much better thing. And in light of all of that, if you haven't read the story of Joseph, it's just such a moving story because his brothers leave him for dead and just abandon him. And he ends up getting falsely accused by somebody and goes to prison. And then he ends up interpreting dreams for the king, and the king likes him. And so Joseph ends up suddenly in this position of power. And at the end of Joseph's story, he brings his brothers and his family in, the family that abandoned him, and reconciles with them. And it's really a beautiful story. So that's what I would say about that is the Bible is not ignorant of the suffering and the dysfunction that people experience in families. And yet we're called to this agape love version of it anyway.
Yeah. Could you imagine, Dan, being Joseph's brothers in that moment when they realize who it is that they're standing before? Yeah. They're just like, oh, we're in for it now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Whoopsies, but redemption and forgiveness and restoration at its finest.
Yeah.
Can you help us? Because I know for some people, it kind of could have seemed like a left turn. Because the series is a lost art of friendship, and we're talking about the importance of these meaningful human interactions, the friendships that you choose. Like you and I have talked about that, and I still tear up when I think about how you shared about the leper and Jesus, and just that the choice that we get to make to love and serve. Anyway, but for some people, it felt like a left turn to then like the family talk within the friendship series. Can you maybe help connect those dots for people who are still like, okay, but what did that have to do with this whole series about friendship?
That's a really good question. Because you can kind of get overwhelmed with all of the metaphors in the Bible, and I think how those are related. And really, it's a really helpful way to kind of think through Revelation is how do these metaphors relate to one another? How does Jesus as king and Jesus as shepherd relate to each other? And how does brothers and sisters relate to, everything else? And friendship and family, how do those relate? I think how I look at it is that I think that family is sort of like the baseline or the standard by which you look at friendship. And because, in a world where everybody's struggling for resources and there's competition and there's suffering and there's all of that, friendship can easily become just pragmatic, where as long as you are serving me, as long as I'm getting something out of it, and as long as you're getting something out of it, then the friendship will be okay. But as soon as I'm not getting fed by you anymore and you're not adding value to my life, well, then it's over. And it's such a pragmatic, shallow type of friendship. And that sort of is what happens in the world that we live in. And this idea of brother and sister sort of like snaps us to a much higher standard. It's, yeah, you're friends, but at this level of connection as brothers and sisters, because, in healthy families, in families that function, that aren't dysfunctional, brothers and sisters tend to stay together, and their relationship tends to persist regardless of what they do for each other or what life circumstances do. There tends to be that bond there. And so that's how I look at it. I look at it as brothers and sisters as sort of the standard for how the bond between kingdom friends should be, how strong that bond should be. That's how I do it. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that was really helpful. And as you were talking, I just kept thinking it's like brothers and sisters, the way that we are meant to be for one another, the way that families are supposed to be for one another without the dysfunction. There is a permanence there. There's not a fear of losing that relationship. You kind of, when done the right way, meaning without all of the mess that we can see that happens in families, like we've been talking about, but when done the right way, there is a security there. There is there's not going to be a walking away there. There's not going to be anything that could harm or damage that relationship. It's like the ultimate safety. So I love the way that you said that, instead of looking at our friendships as, I'm just going to say disposable or quid pro quo, that we should elevate it to that standard of the brother, sister, sibling relationship, familial relationship. That leads me to, though, a question about friendships, spiritual friendships. And do you think, Dan, that those are, if we're just saying the permanence of the family relationship, and one of the things that was said on Sunday was, actually, we're going to be around one another for eternity. Do you think, this is a question that's come up, that when you are in a spiritual friendship intentionally with other folks, that is meant to last forever? Or do you think that relationship could be more seasonal or life stage or what have you? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think now is the time where I'm going to say the exact opposite of what I just said a couple minutes ago. No, I'm just kidding.
We like to give both perspectives.
That's right. No, I think it is meant to be eternal. But that being said, there are functional episodes that we go through where, I remember, I don't know if you know this, but I had a D- average in high school, and I just barely graduated. In fact, there's a really good story on how I graduated that someday I will share with you. It's an amazing story. Ooh. It's my favorite story. Barbara is sick to death of hearing about it, but someday I'll share it.
Okay.
But so I had a D- average. But then after I graduated high school barely with a D- average, I read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. I fell in love with learning. Suddenly my whole life changed, and now I wanted to go to college. And so I got in on academic probation, and my strategy was this. My strategy was to find the smartest, best student I could find and roommate with them and just learn how to be a good student from them. And and he turned out he was also my best friend. I mean, and he's just a super, super smart guy. Still the smartest person I know. And so, but that, after college, we kind of went different ways. And, but like, if we were to get together, we would still, we would connect like no big deal, but the intensity and the time we spent together and the talking together and the communication together, it really was an episode that I don't think will ever be that intimate again. But the bond is still there. And so I think that, you have this solid brother and sister bond, but you can have ebbs and flows of intimacy throughout that. And, and I think that's good, because I think personalities, we have so many different types of personalities, and some people rub others the wrong way, and they don't, there's not like there's no vibe there. There's no harmony between them. And sometimes it can be tough to spend time with certain personalities that rub you the wrong way. And so that's how I look at it. I think the bond is forever, but the intimacy ebbs and flows. So
yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I too was thinking back to what I would call my first spiritual friend, and it was my college best friend. And I mean, I had friends before that were believers, but as far as like really intentionally like encouraging one another and challenging one another and all of the things, my college best friend. And I would say we are still friends to this day, all these years later. Of course, we live in two separate states and have since we were 22 years old, we have lived in separate states, and don't get to see each other a ton because we live in separate states. And she's married with 4 kids, and I'm married with 4 kids, and all the things. So the quantity, the amount of time that we spend together has definitely changed. The quality, the depth of how we relate to one another has definitely changed, but we still love one another. So yeah, I think there are those ebbs and flows of intimacy, of time spent, of how you're spending that time together. And sometimes it's purely just seasonal things of life. It's not, I'm not talking about like, oh, there was a big blow up and we never spoke to each other again. That's not what I mean. That's not what I'm referring to when I say that these things changed. So I agree with you. Many words to say I agree with you. I do think these friendships are forever, but the intensity, the time, the intimacy, I think that does ebb and flow depending on where you are in life and what's going on and where they are in life and what they've got going on. So
yeah. It's fun. Like we've talked about friendship now for what seems like a year. I mean, we've been like really going deep with this. Yeah. And I'm excited. yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I'm excited to move on to the next series. And I will say this, this series, I feel like, is related to the next series. We're going to be starting a series on, this is a sneak peek. Only MuseCast people get to see this. So, but next week we're starting a series on spiritual disciplines, and what that series is about. We're back in the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus talks about fasting, and he talks about praying, and he talks about giving to the needy and so forth. But what that series is really about is it really has a lot to do with how do you manage life with a body, and we're embodied in this realm, and I think it's related to the series on friendship, because part of being a person embodied, and this is very abstract, but part of that is that, we need, having this body, we need to feed it. We need to give it food. We need to give it water. And there's certain things that it needs. And, but there are dangers with those needs. And the disciplines help us to give our bodies what they need while also preventing us from getting trapped into things that are dangerous for it. And it's a very kind of practical yet profound kind of look at what it means to be embodied. We're coming out of this friendship series, which I think is very much related to that in this way. Another thing that our embodied self needs is connection. We don't seem to do well when we are all by ourselves. It's almost as if we need people to kind of bounce off of and to touch and to connect with. And so even though we're shifting out of the friendship series, it really is still about this being an embodied self. And I'm really, really excited for it. Greg's got some really cool stuff coming this weekend. I think people will really like. So that's my teaser.
I'm excited too. I love it. MuseCast audience, you heard it here first. See all the perks that you get to tuning in, for tuning in. Okay. Well, I think that is a great time, Dan, for us to put a bow on this conversation with a poem.
Yes.
Dan, if you guys did not know, Dan is a gifted writer.
Well, this is not for me, though.
No, but that means that you can recognize other gifted writers. Yeah. I was going somewhere with that, Dan.
Oh, okay, good. Okay,
Dan is a gifted writer. He is very creative. He puts out haikus. If you follow him on social media, you'll get to see those every week. And so because of his the way his brain works in that respect, he's able to recognize gifts in other people that align with that. So Dan has found this poem that he's going to share with us. And this is the bow on top, the conclusion of The Lost Art of Friendship.
That's right. This is from Robert Frost, and the poem is called Revelation. And it's a short poem, and it goes like this. We make ourselves a place apart, behind light words that tease and flout. But oh, the agitated heart, till someone really find us out. 'Tis pity if the case require, or so we say, that in the end, we speak the literal to inspire the understanding of a friend. But so with all, from babes that play at hide and seek with God so far, so all who hide so well away must speak and tell us where they are. And I think what I like about this poem, where we're at right now, is we're coming out of a pandemic. We're coming out of we're in the middle of a culture that doesn't like each other, and there's all sorts of hostility, and there's this impulse to just hide and to seclude yourself and to build your little kingdom and your little tower with a little moat. And what Robert Frost is saying is that all of you who hide so well away must speak and tell us where you are. Now's the time to start to get back out and to connect with people and to make yourself known so that we can get to know you. And if that means coming to church, if that means coming to the gathering groups or coming to the refuge on Thursdays, I am encouraging you to do that.
I love it. Make yourself known. All right, folks, that is it. That was the bow on top. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Robert Frost. Absolutely lovely. All right, let's do a high five just as we kind of close out this series and say goodbye to our community today. Ready, Dan?
Ready.
High five.
All right.
All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. New series coming up. You won't want to miss it. Don't forget, circle back next week with us. We'll be right here unpacking that conversation from the Sunday sermon. Have a great week, everyone.